Hello everyone, this is the Kingdom Channel once again, and this will be part 2 of Mark 1, where I will be going through all of Mark. Hopefully it won't take as long as it does in Mark 1, but let's get right to it. So today we're going to be in verses 9 through 13. Now it happened that in those days Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee, and was baptized by John in the Jordan. And immediately coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens opening, and the Spirit like a dove descending upon him. And a voice came out of the heavens, "You are my beloved Son, and you I am well pleased." So the first question I kind of want to ask, because it seems odd, because if you remember before this, John was baptizing people for the forgiveness of sins. It was an outward action that showed the heart that they were forgiven of sin, that they were turning away from sin. So that comes to the question then, why was Jesus baptized? And don't feel bad if this is confusing, because even John the Baptist was confused. He says, you should be baptizing me, yet you come to me. That's what John the Baptist says in John 3:11. And so really what Jesus is doing is, because John the Baptist was there and he was a prophet of God speaking on behalf of God, and he was commanding the people of Israel to be baptized. So in obedience to the Father, because Jesus had to be perfectly obedient to the Father, he himself also had to be baptized. And even further from that, in doing that, he is identifying with sinful man. Not that he's a sinner. We can most definitely say that Jesus did not sin, but he was identifying with sinful man. Because if he wasn't identifying with sinful man, he couldn't represent us. The next thing is that in verses 9 through 11, we see that God is called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But let's compare that to Deuteronomy 6, verse 3 or 4. "Hear, O Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one." And most of the translations will read, "The Lord is one, the Lord is our God." So comparing verse 4 of Deuteronomy 6 to verses 9 and 11 in Mark 1, what can we conclude about God? So I think most of you should have this, that God is one, but he is also three. And we also know that if God is one, how is he one? Well, when we look through the Bible, we see that God's will is one. And there might be some questions of, when Jesus says, "Not my will, but your will." And that really is a whole nother route, because that's talking about the hypostatic union, how Jesus was truly God and truly man. But what it means is that God is one in nature, but he is three persons. And this isn't modalism, where he's putting on one face and then taking it off and putting on another face. But you see here that all three persons of the Trinity are present. So this actually tells us multiple things about our triune God. One is that they're co-eternal, but it is one God. And then another thing is that they still have distinct roles. So we see that the Spirit descended upon the Son, and the Father said, "You are my beloved Son, and you I am well pleased." And we can find that there are different roles for the persons of the Trinity throughout the Bible. So we see that God is one, but the persons of the Trinity have different roles. But for example, when we look at salvation, the Father sent the Son, right? The Father is sending the Son, which is different than the Son coming to earth. But the thing is that their will is the same. It's not that the Son is willing to do one thing and the Father is not willing to do another, but it's that it was the Father's will that the Son would be sent, and it was the Son's will that the Son would be sent. and it was the Holy Spirit's will that the Son would be sent. So when you think of anything that God is willing to do, it's his will. It's his one will, because they're not different wills. And you're going to find the distinctions of the roles of each person of the Trinity throughout the Bible. So one of the things I want you to focus on, or to just have in mind when going through Mark, if you're writing this down, is the role of each member of the Trinity, because you'll see that throughout Mark in different ways. And another thing I want us to notice is that it says the Spirit was like a dove. So what is significant about a dove? Think of a dove. So a few things is, one, we need to notice that this is like a dove, and that the Spirit is not a dove, but like a dove. So his form is similar to a dove. Now, when we look back at Genesis 1:2, it talks about how the Spirit of the Lord was hovering over the face of the waters. This is during creation. And rabbis at that time attributed this being like a dove. So this was kind of a reference to God. And we can see that through this, that the Holy Spirit is God. And also there's these other things, like a dove is gentle. They're not like birds of prey that are going to swoop down and grab you. And they don't really fight you on things, but they're gentle. And that's another representation of the Holy Spirit, is this gentleness, this comforting bird. Now, it transitions from talking about the Trinity and just goes, and immediately the Spirit drove him to go out into the wilderness. And he was in the wilderness for 40 days being tempted by Satan. And he was with the wild beasts, and the angels were ministering to him. So this seems like a weird transition, but what is significant about Jesus being tempted by Satan in the wilderness for 40 days? And I want you to think of a few things when considering this question. First, I want you to think of what happened to Adam and Eve in the garden. And then second, I want you to think of Israel in the wilderness. Hebrews 4:14 through 16 says this: "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us take hold of our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but one who has been tempted in all things like we are, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need." So this is just great news for us. This is a huge part of the gospel. A lot of times we can focus on the cross, which is good, and see how the Father treated Jesus as if he were a sinner. But we forget the other part, that the Father treats us as if we lived Jesus's perfect life. He's our perfect representative. And unlike Adam, who fell to sin when Satan tempted him face to face, Jesus was tempted face to face with Satan and did not sin. He was tempted in all things like we are, yet without sin. And this is the way we can rest. This is the way that as Christians, we can rejoice, because we're going to see our sinfulness and we're going to be wanting to be rid of it. But this is how we rest, is that we see that Jesus was without sin. He is our perfect place of hiding. He is our perfect representative. And because of that, we can draw near with confidence to the throne of grace. We can draw near to God because of him. And if you want to take a deeper look into how Christ is our representative and how Adam was our representative, I would look into Romans 5:12 through 21. And I think that will give you maybe a better understanding of what's going on here, how Jesus went into the wilderness. So we're drawing near to the end of the video, so now I'm just going to ask a few questions for you to dwell on until the next one. Sorry, this one is a little shorter, but the next one is just going to be so much longer that I couldn't fit this one in the other one. But the first thing I want you to think about is to contrast Israel's walk with God for 40 years in the wilderness and contrast Jesus's walk in Israel, or walk in the wilderness for his 40 days. And I also want you to think about this. What is the significance of Israel's 40 years and Jesus's 40 days, and how do they connect? And another challenge I'm going to give you, which is less of a question, is to look throughout the scriptures to find the Trinity. Find what it means and do a little research to be able to define it for yourself if someone were to ask you.